Alright, so I read the book Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, and the summary of it is, in the year 2026, Guy Montag is a firefighter who, instead of putting out fires, starts them to burn books. His new neighbor, Clarice, makes him begin to start questioning how the world works. She disappears and steals some books that he should have burned, hoping to find knowledge about the world. He gets sick of not having anyone to talk to and visits Faber, an old man who started making him question the world years before this book happened by giving him his first book. Faber agrees to help Guy out, and Guy goes and confronts his fire chief, Beatty. Beatty ridicules him and makes him burn down his own house, which is fine because then Guy gets back at him by starting him a blaze. Guy goes on the run and visits a bunch of old dudes who were also run out of the city, who tell them they will help rebuild the world after it concludes itself. Then the book ends with the nuclear blast that flattens the city along with the people in it. And during the time this was written, brainless TV sitcoms were becoming popular, so the author took that to an extreme and envisioned a world where people lived with only convenience in mind. And a lot of people in the book just really went off of stuff that made them happy. Like, if it didn't make them happy, they didn't have it. So my reading strategy for reading this was, there was a lot of description in Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. A lot of the paragraphs are used to analyze any random small object, which led me to simply skim or skip the paragraphs that started out very descriptive. If it was in a part of the story that there were quite a bit happening, I skimmed it to see if there was any information that could actually be necessary to the main line of the plot. If it didn't seem to be interesting or useful, I just straight up skipped it and moved on to the next paragraph. Or if it was like part of a little section that I knew was going to be non-relevant and like it was like a dream or something. But the theme of Fahrenheit 451 is books are dangerous to large groups or individuals who seek to control others by brainwashing. Because books create individuality, the overthrower of total domination. The power-hungry people, which get others on their side by telling them that everyone else is doing it, so must be the right way. Which is why in the story books are banned, because they cause unhappiness, and if one person isn't happy, it bleeds through society, and everyone starts feeling different emotions, and the government did not know how to deal with individuals, just the majority. So they just changed everyone to be the majority. It's kind of like taking the poison out of the water for them. The definition me and my partner Google define that classic when used as a noun means a work of art of recognized and established value. I do not believe Fahrenheit 451 represents this definition because there's nothing to the plot or story. Most of the book tells about one afternoon and the day after. The only reason it is long enough to be called a book is because a lot of unnecessary information is thrown between every small thing that happens and every small detail. A quote is, his hands had been infected and soon it would be his arms. He could feel the poison working up his wrists and into his elbows and his shoulders. Then the jump over from shoulder blade to shoulder blade like a spark leaping a gap. His hands were ravenous, and his eyes were beginning to feel hunger, as if they must look at something, anything, everything. Bradbury, page 38. This whole event just happened in maybe 2 seconds if it was really slow. The amount of detail tracing the poison, quote unquote, was something that was not even close to the main point of the book and did not happen in any relatively exciting point, so it is completely useless. Descriptions like this are all over the book, making the book more informational and boring than a college brochure they send to everyone in the mail. These things are reasons why the book is not and will not be a classic, because there's no established value, and I certainly cannot recognize any value in it. Analysis of the book. The common human concern of control is revealed in the story. After Montag read a few lines of poetry to his wife's friends, Miss Bowles stands up and says, "You see, I knew it. That's what I wanted to prove. I knew it would happen. I've always said poetry and tears, poetry and suicide, and crying, and awful feelings, poetry and sickness, all that mush. Now I've had it proved to me. You're nasty, Mr. Montag. You're nasty." Bradbury, page 97. When the security the people had without books, security that wasn't questioned or twisted or changed at all, the people adapted to it and learned to enjoy it. The security that was shoved upon them by the government, they just pretty much took it in and began to like it. When there was no bad part of life, it also took away the good part too, and the people did not mind this so long as it kept the bad parts away. It's kind of like you can't have the light without the dark, or you won't recognize the light without the dark. And the people are willing to give up their control for a better life. When this is threatened, like before the quote, people do not know how to do or what to do, and they get mad or extremely scared or both. Miss Bowles in this instance felt both mad and scared, leading her to shout at Montag and show how poetry and books and all are all terrible, because they impede upon the security that they had, meaning that people gave up their control for nothing. Also, the quote shows how controlled everyone is. A simple reading of poetry sets them off, and they overreact because that is what the government has trained them to do. The government controls their access to these things that could possibly threaten the government's ability to rule all. I read Brave New World last year, and I found that this was quite like that, where the government controls what people are exposed to, so that it limits the experiences that they can have, and so then they're not wanting those experiences. Like, if you've never run and you've never seen anybody run, then you won't even know what running is, so you won't want to do it. It's kind of like what it does here, except that's kind of like what it does in Brave New World. And the difference here is that they actually show it to them, but in a bad way, so then they don't want to do it. Like, they would show running as being a huge opportunity to break your legs and ankles and have all these injuries, so then you just won't want to do it. And then my discussion question was whether or not Fahrenheit 451 should be taught in school. It should not be taught in school. There's a very obvious answer to nearly everyone that reads this book. The book is overall very boring, and the only message or lesson it is trying to teach is that books contain knowledge. This is not even too much of a lesson, though, because all throughout kids' lives, the English teachers they had told them and branded into their brain that books are full of knowledge and knowledge is power. So the fact this book is a broken record means that there is effectively no lesson to learn from the book. There are no parts within the book that can be uselessly manipulated to be interpreted differently, as everything in the book is described in such detail that there are no alterations that could fit between the tightly filled gaps of detail. For example, let's say in a story, a door is red. Now this could possibly be interpreted as anger being expressed, or danger, or even love. These things can be possible because the figurative authors lack a detail. A lot of the time people say the more details the better, but as seen in Fahrenheit 451, it is obvious that there is definitely a limit. And the story, Fahrenheit 451, definitely went over that quite a bit. At some point, the story just becomes uninteresting and bland, as most of the reading is describing irrelevant details. All of these things are reasons why this book should not be taught in schools. That was my independent novel presentation of Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Thank you. Alright, so I read the book Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, and the summary of it is, in the year 2026, Guy Montag is a firefighter who, instead of putting out fires, starts them to burn books. His new neighbor, Clarice, makes him begin to start questioning how the world works. She disappears and steals some